Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go up to all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything, and you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, May the 1st of 2024, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host of the most, Will Buchanan. On How the Frack We Got Here, we do take the events of the week and try to make sense. Before we get started, guys, let you know that we are a news podcast, which means that we do try to get our sources from the most reputable places. We do not do sensational news like Fox News or The Blaze, Daily Beast, whatever extreme left or extreme right. We simply go with award-winning journalism that actually presents facts. That's what you people want, so do we, therefore we give it to you. At the same time, we do try to watch our language, but sometimes words do fly. At the same time, there may be things that might be seen that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, how do we get from here? Well, I never thought, really and truly, a person like Marjorie Taylor Greene would actually still follow it. Don't get me wrong. She's had a track history of saying things, for lack of better words, blowing smoke out of her ass. However, it seems that she has a bone to pick with the current Speaker of the House, and it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon.
Marjorie Taylor Greene is signaling she could trigger a move to oust Speaker Mike Johnson as soon as today. House Democratic leaders say they would save Speaker Johnson if the motion to vacate is brought to the House floor for a vote. But Greene says she wants to put Congress on record. ABC News contributing correspondent Rachel Bade joins me now from Capitol Hill for more. Rachel, here we are again, maybe. So this week, Greene said that Johnson's days as speakers are numbered. Those were her words. A few Republicans have said that they would support this motion to oust him. But House Democratic leaders say they would support him. So how significant is that? And what's different for the Democrats now versus previous speaker votes?
Yeah, Diane, right now as we speak, Marjorie Taylor Greene is just outside this building where I'm standing right now in the House offices. She's holding up a MAGA hat, talking and railing about Mike Johnson, saying that he is the uniparty speaker and that he's got to go. We're waiting to get word any minute now about whether she's actually going to file this motion today, Diane. But in terms of the significance of this moment, with Democrats coming out yesterday and saying, look, we're going to support Mike Johnson as speaker. If it comes to that, that is huge. I mean, I can't remember a single time in history where we've seen something like this. And traditionally, Democrats would never vote for a Republican speaker. Republicans would never vote for a Democratic speaker. So this is incredibly rare here. And in terms of how this compares to last fall, when Kevin McCarthy was ousted from the speakership, Democrats back then said they frankly didn't trust Kevin McCarthy. He sort of had this reputation of making promises and not really keeping them. He regularly sort of poked Democrats in the eye when it came to sort of blasting them on bipartisan policies that they were trying to get passed. Mike Johnson has taken a very different tact. He's worked with Democrats a lot in recent weeks. And because of that, they say they're going to be there for him if there is an attempt to oust him by Marjorie Taylor Greene.
And Rachel, Greene now says that she will call this motion next week. So how are Republicans dealing with this divide within the party?
I mean, look, it's causing a lot of consternation. A lot of Republicans, including conservatives, including members who voted to oust McCarthy last fall, they're frankly fed up with Marjorie Taylor Greene. They think now is not the time to do it. It's in the middle of an election year when Republicans need to be united. I have some reporting this morning that RNC Chairman Michael Whatley personally spoke to Marjorie Taylor Greene in his office yesterday here on Capitol Hill and urged her to stand down. Obviously, we've been reporting for several weeks now that Donald Trump himself and his inner circle have warned her that this could spill onto their own campaign, and they're concerned about that. So Republicans are really unhappy. I think there are a lot of people wondering, actually, if Marjorie Taylor Greene, in forcing this issue against all the advice that she is hearing right now from Republicans, is actually hurting herself politically more than she's going to be hurting Johnson. I mean, she is going against Donald Trump. He is somebody who traditionally has been very close with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and people are not going to forget that anytime soon, Diane.
So let's think about this for a second here. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a woman who has embarrassed herself by doing nothing since the start of her political career, paid, mind you, for doing nothing. On top of that, has not instituted any policy, has spouted lie after lie after lie after lie. On top of that, also, really has not contributed to Congress outside of ousting former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. So now current Speaker Mike Johnson is in her crosshairs because he worked with Democrats. Think about this for a second. Her only gripe with Mike Johnson is that if we voted you in, you have to do what we need you to do, which is not work with Democrats, keep them from overspending, and let the government shut down regardless. Someone needs to tell Marjorie Taylor Greene that's not how the Speaker of the House works. You have to work with both sides. You have to keep the government running. Otherwise, come election time, you may not be there. But we did see how the vote of no confidence on Kevin McCarthy was brought up. We did see that somehow they had enough votes to oust him. At the same time, we also saw what happened after Kevin McCarthy. We saw person after person after person get nominated, and they didn't make it. Then you see other people get nominated. They didn't make it. And then we finally get Mike Johnson, who somehow skirts through. And yes, he is a little on the Bible crazy side. No argument about that. But at least they were able to vote to get someone in. But this is how ineffective Congress has been. The 118th Congress, which, again, a lot of Republicans were like, oh, well, we get in, because that's the lie. The lie is that the Republicans said, if we get in, we're going to change things. Well, you're halfway right. You did change things for the worse. And so now, even though a lot of Republicans may not be backing Marjorie Taylor Greene as much as she believes that's going to happen, she could still bring this to a vote. She still could get enough people to get this to come to that procession. But this would make it now the second time in U.S. history that if this is done, a Speaker of the House has been removed within a single congressional term. That's never been heard of. But it's Marjorie Taylor Greene. We really shouldn't be surprised by this. But what also we shouldn't be surprised by, guys, is that we talked about this last week about Arizona and their 1864 abortion law. Keep in mind, 1864. Somehow abortion was really thought of during the time of the Civil War. And even more so, the Supreme Court of Arizona tried to uphold the abortion law. Well, thankfully, there are steps being put in place that they're trying to actually remove it. However, there's still people and roadblocks.
Battleground state voting to repeal one of the strictest abortion bans in the country, with protesters clashing outside the Capitol. Inside, two Republicans broke ranks, joining the Democrats to repeal the 1864 law, which bans abortions in all cases except to save a mother's life.
160 years later, life is precious.
The Democratic governor is expected to sign the repeal, but that isn't enough to lift the state court's ban on abortion right away. Due to a morass of legislative rules and maneuvers, the ban will likely be in effect for a period of time this summer. While across the South, abortion restrictions now blanket nearly a dozen states, including Florida, where beginning today, the procedure is banned for anyone further than 6 weeks along, with exceptions including rape, incest, and human trafficking up to 15 weeks.
The impact will no doubt be catastrophic. Florida used to be a safe harbor for Southerners to access abortion. The impact of this ban will be felt not just in Florida, but across the Southeast.
The vice president in Jacksonville today pinning the blame squarely on Donald Trump, who appointed 3 Supreme Court right to an abortion.
Trump says he wants to leave abortion up to the states. Today, 1 in 3 women of reproductive age live in a state with a Trump abortion ban.
Dr. Shelley Tien, who provides abortions in both Arizona and Florida, says 6 weeks is before most patients even know they're pregnant.
It is essentially a near complete abortion ban, and it is devastating.
Scribbled on the wall at the clinic where she works, this note: traveled 5 hours because of laws in my state. We matter. Laura Jarrett, NBC News.
It's crazy, isn't it? That even now in 2024, we're still talking about abortion. That somehow in 1864, Arizona decided to ban abortion out, which is completely crazy. Even more so, it's crazy now when the world of common sense, which I know common sense ain't common, I know, that the simple fact of the matter is they now have to jump through so many hoops to repeal this ban, which thankfully they are trying to do, even though some people out there, how can I put this ever so nicely? Because I don't want to say idiots. I try not to say idiots. I try to say, well, let's be honest, it's idiots. Because anybody who is pro-life, or as I like to call you, pro-birth, always seems to have this issue of, no, we need to protect the children, yet I don't see none of you at adoption agencies. I don't see none of you at the child protective services where they actually have to find foster parents and places for these kids to be. I'm not seeing you guys, mentoring children, because once they do become 18 or they do come close to 18 years old, they're actually shipped out of the system and, left to their own devices. I don't see any of you past pro-birth, but yet for some odd reason, you feel like you have to speak for a being that can't speak for themselves, and yet you think you know more than the person that's carrying it. Again, I could go on and on about this, but the simple fact of the matter is, guys, Roe versus Wade held up for so long until how they sat there and said it. Trump pushed through 3 conservative judges, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett. There we go. Oh, their names just haunt me more than their face haunt me more than names do. But 3 conservative judges, and yet overloaded the Supreme Court. 3 judges in one single Trump term, thanks to his buddies on the Hill. Let's not forget old Moscow Mitch, who had the measures pushed through at a time when they had the Senate and they had the Senate and the presidency, and they got stuff pushed through. And they got 3 Supreme Court judges to overload the Supreme Court to the conservative right. And that's how we wound up with Roe versus Wade being overturned. It's how we wound up with part of affirmative action relating to college entrances, how we got that taken down. That has led to the destruction of DEI programs practically anywhere, which we'll get into momentarily. So, again, with Florida also pushing a 6-week ban because Governor Dictator Ron DeSantis believes that life is precious, so precious that he will force a woman to carry a child, even though he himself cannot carry children nor bear the pain of childbirth. But at the same time, these people still feel the need to go ahead and sit there and say, you know what, women, you don't know what's going on with your bodies, but we know what's best for you. Go ahead and be the brood mares. Be the heifers, because you know what heifers is, right? Cows that breed. Brood mares, also horses that breed. You know what the Republican people are saying? The Republican Party is saying to women in general: we see you nothing more than human incubation chambers. We want you to be our brood mares, our heifers. We want you to give us as many kids as humanly possible. Why? Because simply put, we need the numbers. And that's the fracked up part that they're not saying. They're saying, oh, we to protect the children. But again, what happens post-birth? Not a goddamn thing. I'm just saying it like it is. But if you haven't noticed by now, we here at How the Frack We Got Here, we're always pro-choice, because what a woman does with her body is her own business. The choices and consequences are always hers, and they should be hers. Because if a man's body and his rights to it were ever challenged, riots in the street, please tell me I'm wrong. That's all I'm saying. But moving along, guys, I keep finding stories like this, and I keep saying all the time about student loan debt. What am I talking about? I am talking about Biden canceling Biden and the Department of Education are set to cancel $6 billion in student debt for borrowers that went to the Art Institutes, which was a former for-profit college group. So if you went to places like the New England Institute of Art and the art institutes that are under that umbrella, basically what they're saying is that the for-profit system that was put in place there was basically misleading students. I know for a lot of people that have actually went to those colleges have pretty much said, no freaking kidding. With that also being said, because they were misleading, Biden has again found a way to cancel $6 billion in debt that was held by 317,000 borrowers that have attended these schools. Which again, if you haven't noticed, the Art Institute, you can't find that anywhere. It's actually been defunded, and pretty much dust in the wind. So those 317,000 people that attended that school, which I want to say was from 2017 to now. I'm wrong. Oh, I'm way wrong. So 2004 to 2017. I apologize. But the thing about that is, if those people are finally getting relief. Now think about that. Imagine going to a for-profit college in which you use federal funding, and you may have not gotten the job you wanted, but the debt still sticks to you. And now those same people are about to get debt relief. I'm just saying, debt relief. Keep in mind, the same Department of Education that almost canceled nearly $37 million of student loan debt for specific borrowers who attend the University of Phoenix, and $72 million for students that attended Ashford University, again, also known as University of Arizona Global Campus. So we are seeing the fact that Biden can cancel student loan debt under specific circumstances, but I still say the same doggone thing. If we're able to cancel student loan debt under specific circumstances, why, oh, why are we not able to look at the $1.7 trillion plus student loan debt and say, you know what, let's cancel that too? Because you know what you'll usually hear? What you'll usually hear when we say cancel student loan debt is a whole bunch of people, well, I was able to pay off my loan, so does that mean I get my money back? It's a dumbass argument. It's a straw man argument because it makes no sense. It's a dumbass response because everybody's situation wasn't the same. If you were able to pay off your student loan debt, congratulations, bravo. It's basically 2 out of every 10 people that are able to do that. That's the statistic. 2 out of every 10 people are able to pay back their student loan debt. That's not a very good statistic because for every 2, there are 8 people out there who are saddled with student loan debt. And again, I keep stressing this all the time. Student loan debt on your credit profile wreaks havoc on that debt to income ratio. Because a lot of people understand when you have a lot of debt to income ratio, it's harder to get approved for auto financing. It's hard to get approved for mortgages. It's hard to get approved for credit cards. It's hard to get those high paying jobs because a lot of those high paying jobs do check your credit report. And if you have a serious load of debt on your credit report, makes you look like a liability. At the same time, it turns consumers into forever paying debtors. And you can look at the horror stories that people have gotten student loans because I said it all the time. Student loans is predatory lending that's never been checked. Of all the things that Biden and the Department of Education could be doing, they really should be rechecking how student loans are done. For one thing, removing the doggone interest. The interest is literally the money generating killer that people never get out of student loans. That, for example, because again, the interest still collects way past the fact you're out of school, way past whether or not you got your degree, the interest still rolls on. And that's the game. That's the rig. That's the rub. You're paying forever on the interest and never on the principal. So you dang near either have to come into a crap load of money or be lucked out in these other situations where Biden is still able to find ways of canceling student loan debt. But for the rest of us, those student loan debts those creditors are coming if they're not coming already. At the same time, people have made unfortunately life-changing decisions. Some people can't start families because they can't afford it. Some people can't get homes because they can't afford it. Some people can't get cars, the things that you actually do need to maintain jobs. because we don't have a good transit system yet. Because of the fact that we are not able to really cancel student loan debt has affected millions of Americans. But I point this out all the time because anytime I hear someone sit there and say, well, if I found a way, you found a way. Really? Do you say that to every business that picked up a PPP loan, that Paycheck Protection Program, BS program? You know, the one that spit out $870 billion, and yet 96% of that program was automatically forgiven, which meant that less than 4% had to pay back their loans out of 870 billion with a B. But, you know, it's not all free because we actually had to pay it. Your American taxpayer picked up the tab for the $870 billion program that was taken by corporations and by folks who had money and folks who had means and folks who could have gotten traditional loans but chose not to. But 96% of those were forgiven, and it was crickets. Nobody complained. Nobody said anything. Crickets. But yet when it comes to basically helping out a large number of Americans and saying, hey, your debt is forgiven, apparently we have an issue with that, which again, I don't understand. It's almost like saying, you know, everybody gets in an uproar when we see billions of dollars go to Ukraine, or we see it go to Taiwan, or we see it go to Israel. Everybody says the same thing. Oh, you can come with billions of dollars to help foreign countries, but you can't help Americans. These are the same people that turn around and say, well, let's help the people that got student loan debts. Whoa. Why do we have to help them? You are the same people. And that right there just mystifies me. But again, happy that those that went to our institute, all 317,000 you guys will have your slates clean. And I don't know about you. And again, if you've never had student loan debt removed from you, that is a huge weight off their shoulders, because that means that now they can financially move forward. And that's what we all want to do as Americans. We all want to move financially forward. But again, no argument on that. But for those that do argue, I just feel like, you know, you argue just because, instead of just, you know, being happy for people, you know, like we used to be. But moving right along, guys, I want to cover this story as well, because again, it is amazing to me how we had to fight to have an act put in, have a federal law put in to prevent hair discrimination. Crown Act, right? We have to now reintroduce it because people, I should say Republicans, are basically saying, yeah, that law's there, but we don't follow it. And again, it amazes me so that we have to reintroduce it, because as for people of color, we do have different hairstyles. I mean, just saying, that we shouldn't be discriminated for. We should not be discriminated for our hair. And I always say it's only because certain napkins can't pull off certain looks. That's all I'm saying. But the fact that we have to keep on passing this legislation in other areas, mainly red states, because keep in mind, guys, I literally talked about a story where a child was in Texas who followed their stupidest, dumbass hair rule, the rule for hair. He followed it to a T, but because it was still locked, it was still in locks. The Texas school system at the time sat there and said he cannot attend because he's violating the act. And I'm thinking to myself, wasn't there a Crown Act that was put in place to make sure that this happened, that this didn't happen? And again, we're only seeing a lot of this in the South. Why? Because conformity. And this is the thing I've always said about the educational system, that outside of the fact that it needs to be woefully revamped, reformed, recently reinvested in, but I digress. But anyway, the fact that they are so concerned about a child's hairstyle instead of a child's mental state speaks volumes about what these lawmakers in the South are doing, including my home state of Tennessee, which I've always said is progressively backwards, only because certain Republicans keep getting voted in, and we have a supermajority here. And I can tell you off the bat, this year alone has proven how dumbass they are. Especially you, Mr. Sexton. I'm talking about you. But the fact that we have to introduce the Crown Act, again, to where it still faced, even its initial heyday, it still faced pushback. Because some people believe that, oh, well, no, you're not being discriminated for your hair. It's the fact that rules are rules. Rules that were basically, and I say this all the time, and this ain't the first, I'm not the first person to say it. I definitely won't be the last person to say it. There are suggestions for them and rules for us. Because why do we care about somebody's hair, especially a child's hair, when the main job is to make sure the child is properly educated and given the life skills to be a successful person in society once they've graduated? Shouldn't that be where the particular focus should be in the first place? I can care less about a child's hair as long as it's clean and taken care of. As long as he's not attracting flies like Linus from Peanuts, I think we're okay. But again, I digress. But remember what I talked about earlier about DEI? Keep in mind, and for all those who don't remember, 4 Asian students basically sued Harvard saying, hey, we believe we're not getting into Harvard because we're being discriminated. And that gave the Supreme Court all the ammo in the world to sit there and say, well, let's take this part of affirmative action and kill it for DEI. So if you have anybody to blame for DEI, also, those 4 students still didn't get into Harvard. But the reason why I'm bringing this up, guys, is because of this. Because now a certain lawmaker, and I'll get to it if you're wondering, yes, it's Republican, is proposing a bill that would ban DEI in medical schools. Now, doctors say that this could roll back progress toward improving Black maternal health. Now, keep in mind, guys, this individual, especially you in North Carolina, you may know him, Representative Greg Murphy introduced the Educate Bill, the Educate Act, the Educate Knowing, Embracing Anti-Discrimination, Unbiased Curricula, and Advancing Truth in Education. This basically would amend the Higher Education Act of 1865 to prohibit medical schools from getting federal funding if they adopt policies or requirements related to DEI, including promoting beliefs that a person's sex, race, ethnicity, or skin color makes them a member of an oppressed group, or that the U.S. is a systematically racist country. Let me read that again, because that right there should tell you something. The actual term, the actual law itself, the actual lawmaker, Mr. Representative Greg Murphy out of North Carolina, sat there, and this is his thing, the Educate Act, Embracing Anti-Discrimination, Unbiased Curricula, and Advancing Truth in Education, would amend the Higher Education Act of 1965 to prohibit medical schools from getting federal funding if they adopt policies or requirements related to DEI, including promoting beliefs that a person's sex, race, ethnicity, or skin color makes them a member of an oppressed group, or that the U.S. is a systematically racist country. Again, listen to the wording of that, because that's the bill. And again, it's all about attacking DEI. Diversity, equity, inclusion. That's all it is. They want to attack this and saying, oh, well, because, you know, you're Black, you have it harder. Yes, we do. That's not an opinion. That is a fact of life in this country. Or the U.S. is a systematically racist country. Yes, it is. History has proven that. But it is amazing to me that the napkins are coming out. And as so many others said, including Roland Martin on his show, also have all said the same thing. They are attacking DEI. They are attacking DEI programs because they cannot sit there and say, well, we want to take down affirmative action. So let's go after the one thing that has been taken down in school, that's been taken down in colleges and in businesses everywhere, DEI. And so why is this a problem? Well, if this was to go through, keep in mind, this is aimed at everywhere. And we were just talking about a medical school, mind you, that if you were going to a medical school and they don't have DEI programs in there, it could affect Black doctors. It could affect women that want to be doctors. It could affect other people of color that want to be doctors. It could affect that because that's the reason why those DEI programs are in there in the first place, to ensure a fair playing field. And in the world of medical health, Black people will tell you off the bat, again, this is by facts. If you are seen by a Black doctor, Black people's health or their statistics of being more healthy improve. If a Black woman is seen by a Black doctor, her chances of having any type of medical fatalities drops. If a woman is seeing a black OBGYN, again, baby SIDS or baby fatality syndromes, those statistics drop. And I keep saying this all the time about representation matters, but there's just something, because there seems to be this underlying issue in the medical field where, black women will tell you all the time, if you're not seen by a black person, you may not be taken seriously by a non-melanated person, non-medical professional, especially for black women, because there's this instance like, oh, black women can take have greater tolerance to pain, or can't feel pain, or can't do this, or can't do that. It is amazing to me that the level of care should be more for women of color, and that there should be more medical professionals who are melanated. That's the reason why those DEI programs exist, for that specific reason. But imagine if that Educate bill did go into place, becomes law. That means that funding can get stripped from anywhere that may promote anything related to, well, non-napkin people. And do you see why they? And again, you love it's literally trying to label as critical race theory education, which again we've already sat there and said critical race theory isn't being taught anywhere unless you're in the law school. But the fact that you can't say America's not systematically racist. As a black person, and certain napkins out there that actually have common sense would highly disagree with you. But again, not surprising. What's also not surprising is that another day, another school shooting. However, in this case, this may have been prevented.
Here in the U.S. tonight, reports of an active shooter outside a middle school. Police say a 14-year-old possibly armed with a rifle. That school put on lockdown for a time, and then authorities moving in on that teenager. ABC's Pierre Thomas with what we've learned so far on this Wisconsin case.
Tonight, the small community of Mount Horeb, Wisconsin, shaken after reports of an active shooter headed toward a middle school.
Reports of shots fired at the school.
Children and staff fleeing. The school put on lockdown. Sources telling ABC News shortly after noon, police encountered a 14-year-old with what appeared to be a rifle. Police racing to the scene. The gunman did not breach the school, but police say he was neutralized in a confrontation with officers.
So there is one injury. It's going to be the suspect.
Images all too familiar. Today, nervous parents waiting, SWAT teams, emergency vehicles, and a dead body.
This has been a shock. I mean, so scary. It's devastating to hear what's going on. I'm texting my son right now. He was barricaded in the classroom. They stopped that, but there's still lockdowns. I don't want no kid to go through what's going on, nor parents go through this.
Parents and police understandably shaken. The fear real as mass shootings have become routine in this country, even at schools. No one forgetting Uvalde, and many others like Parkland and Newtown. Police have not released any information on the suspect, whose sources say is a juvenile. David, that town is traumatized tonight, but grateful no one else was injured.
And how many more times are we going to have the same story? Now, again, this is a continuing story as more information does come out. But this may sound messed up, but they got the guy before he can actually cost lives. And I'm not saying it's a guy or a girl. They haven't actually released anything yet. And plus, because they're under the age of 18, they have to notify the parents first. So it may be a few days before we actually get any information about this shooter that decided that today had to be the day. But again, it's going to still bring up other questions. How did they get the firearm? Was the firearm in the house? Where did they get the training? There's going to be a number of those questions, because anytime we have a school shooting, that's what comes up. At the same time, with every school shooting, guys, there always seems to be the question of what can we do about gun laws? And I have sat there and said this as a firearms owner. I am all for more regulation. I am all for the fact for National Registry. I am all for the fact of a mental health check. I am all for the fact that, yes, you should carry liability insurance. I am all for the fact that we should be doing more, and basically saying, especially at these gun trade night shows like here in Tennessee, that background check should be done. And that, because again, like on ghost guns should be banned or regulated. Because again, those, just like ghost guns don't require an age limit. Anybody can purchase them because they're basically kits that you can assemble. But again, with ARs and things of that nature, how these kids are getting them. And then it also just makes me a little bit nervous. You have those in the very same firearm community that want children to be trained, that they want to offer firearms training in school. I am completely against that. Because again, school is education. If you want your child to learn firearms training outside of school, be my freaking guest. But in the same area where they're supposed to learn life skills and supposed to learn what they need to move on to the next level, whether it's education, business, or armed forces, however they choose to live their lives, teaching them how to use a gun while in school might as well teach them how to put fires in the same house they're living in. You're just basically giving them the match at this point. I'm sorry, it makes no sense. It's right up there with our Governor Lee of Tennessee, signing a bill saying teachers can now be armed. First off, teachers are underpaid, overworked in crowded schools, and you want to give them firearms, loaded firearms that they carry on themselves? The thing about gun laws is guns have more protection than practically animals and humans combined. And it never ceases to amaze me that when we look at gun laws, when we look at gun safety, that we don't look at other areas like New Zealand or Japan or Australia or see how they handle their gun laws. But, every time you hear gun laws, Second Amendment, you cannot infringe upon my right to bear arms. Obama's coming for your guns. Ugh. Okay, before I move on, I stress this all the time. These are straw man arguments. Number one, nobody's coming for your guns. I keep telling people, why would the U.S. government spend all that time and manpower? Because to confiscate everybody's guns in America would be a huge ass undertaking that the government really doesn't want to do. At the same time, government has access to arms manufacturers who can give them way cooler stuff than your customized $2,500 AR gun that you got from Cabela's or Bass Pro Shops. America doesn't care about your puny AR rifle when they can get access to better shit. At the same time, the only thing that we should be changing is how guns are regulated, how people can get a hold of them. At the same time, there needs to be a mental health check. There needs to be red flag laws across the board, not just in states. We cannot leave it up to states' rights to determine firearms. We simply cannot. And I'm being honest with you guys, and until we decide to do differently, we're going to see more stuff like this. But we'll keep up with that story as more information comes out. But like I said before, it always comes down to how this kid had this gun. And I guarantee this kid had some mental health problems. But we'll follow that story as it comes along. So let's go ahead and move on to an easier target. Trump, who seems to be going back and forth between the trial and trying to still be his president. And I keep saying this, for a guy that's got over 91 felony convictions, he could still somehow be president. Only in America.
Scheduled to be back on the campaign trail today after an eventful day in court yesterday. The judge fined Trump $9,000 for gag order violations in his criminal hush money trial, warning Trump that he could go to jail if he does it again. The jury also heard from several more witnesses, including Stormy Daniels' former attorney. ABC News investigative reporter Olivia Rubin joins me now, along with former federal prosecutor for New York Southern District, Khan Nowadaye. Olivia, what stands out to you from the testimony that we heard yesterday? Because it was a lot.
It was a lot. I think people were surprised with how gripping the testimony from Keith Davidson was. Remember, he was the lawyer to both Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels when they took their hush money deal. So while David Pecker sort of provided the overview of what that looked like, Keith Davidson took the jurors right inside that negotiating process. He talked about the final days of the Stormy Daniels negotiations and how the payment, once he had agreed to it with Michael Cohen, never happened. And he talked about the excuses that were made for why the $130,000 payment was made. And he took the jurors through all of that. And I think part of what was so key was how he told the jurors why he thought that payment was delayed. He said that he thought it was because they were trying to push it after the election, which goes right into prosecutors' arguments that this was all about the election. And Diane, he also said that from his dealings with Michael Cohen, he got the sense that Michael Cohen didn't really have any authority to do what he was doing and to authorize the money, that it was all coming from Donald Trump. So whereas Trump's team might be trying to make the defense, hey, it's just Michael Cohen, Donald Trump never actually made the payment, what these witnesses are saying, from our dealings with him, it seemed like he was going back for authorization from Donald Trump, so tying him very closely.
Ken, how critical do you think it was for the jury to hear from Keith Davidson, the person on the receiving end of these payments for Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels, and then also to see some of the videos played earlier in court of former President Trump saying, I never knew these women, after already hearing Trump's assistant testify that she stored contact information for both of them?
I think both those points, Dan, are absolutely critical. I think Keith Davidson, as Olivia said, he's laying the foundation for the prosecution of the puzzle pieces that are going to support ultimately what Michael Cohen's going to say later on in this trial. I think the prosecution is doing a very good job of setting forth these witnesses who lay out the story in great detail. And let me tell you, jurors love detail. That's what they're looking for, because that shows credibility. And by the same token, by playing Trump's statements and his denials, the jurors can see that, well, wait a second, maybe the defense isn't so credible here.
Con, Trump is also on the campaign trail today, just a day after being fined $9,000 for gag order violations and being told by the judge he could go to jail if he does it again. So how careful does he have to be with what he says today?
I think of course he has to be careful. He has to be careful for the rest of the trial. The judge has already shown him this is his world, and it's something Trump's not used to. He's in a world, in a courtroom where he's not in control. And now the judge has said $9,000, which granted isn't much, but he's also said, next time, maybe I'm going to put you in jail. Now, personally, I think it's going to take a lot for that to happen. And right now, the prosecution has four more allegations saying 4 more statements that they believe are violations of the gag order. And the judge is going to hear argument on that, I believe, later this week or early next week. So there's another opportunity here for the judge to fine or potentially put the former president in jail for contempt. But I don't necessarily think that's going to happen.
So, Olivia, what are you watching for tomorrow as court resumes?
Well, I think Con just hit on it, because tomorrow, they're going to open with the hearing on the gag order violations. And Judge
These are the additional 4.
The additional 4. So Todd Blanche likely is going to have to try to defend these additional 4 violations. And remember, it didn't go so well for him last time, and now Donald Trump has been held in contempt. And Judge Marchand has actually only allowed 30 minutes for those arguments. So they're going to come in at 9:30, do the gag order violation hearing, and then the jury is coming in at 10 to resume that testimony from Keith Davidson.
All right.
So to basically say to sum this all up, Trump's having fun, I guess. Like I said, we don't really try to cover the trial itself until it gets to the very end, just because you don't need wall-to-wall coverage of what Trump's doing on Monday and then Tuesday and Wednesday. Just know that he is facing one of the federal indictments, and of course, if it doesn't go this way, if they do indict him on this or find him guilty, pretty much that's the end of his campaign run. As he's out there still trying to, how can I put this ever so nicely, fleece the flock, please pay my bill to keep me from going to jail, because again, he's got a lot. But shouldn't be surprised about that. Also, the same way, a little bit. Also, what we also found out is that Biden would love to debate Trump if they do get their first presidential debate. Which again, Trump doesn't debate. He basically spouts everything that he spouts, which is mostly BS. At the same time, makes fun of his candidate. However, he could not do that with Hillary Clinton. Just saying. But with also that being said, guys, we are all definitely going to move forward with this because I keep talking about the police. And now we have another situation where, again, officers involved with trying to arrest a black man who can't breathe, who winds up being pronounced dead. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Tonight, police in Ohio releasing new body cam footage showing a man who became unresponsive during his arrest was later pronounced dead at a hospital. His last words heard in the footage, "I can't breathe." In the video, we hear Frank Tyson yell those words out at least 7 times as cops try to subdue him, with one officer putting a knee on his upper back for about 40 seconds. We are only going to show you that moment once, and we have to warn you here, it is incredibly disturbing.
I can't breathe. I can't. I can't. Get on my neck. I can't breathe.
That's the story right there. I'll be glad I'll be for you.
Okay. I can't breathe.
You're fine. Yep. Shut the
This all happened last Thursday when Tyson allegedly crashed his car into a pole in Canton before running into a nearby bar. You can see here police finding the damaged pole and what they say is Tyson's car nearby before bystanders directed the officers into the bar where Tyson was. An altercation, a tussle between Tyson and the officers starts nearly immediately. That's when they start trying to take him to the ground. The coroner says Tyson's cause of death is still pending. The officers involved are on paid administrative leave while officials investigate. There is, of course, some very obvious overlap with the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis here, who was murdered by a police officer who kept his knee on Floyd's neck for nearly 10 minutes as he too cried out, "I can't breathe." Floyd's death and his last words becoming a rallying cry for the Black Lives Matter movement, spurring huge protests against police brutality in this country. NBC's Dana Griffin is following this one for us. And Dana, we'll get to that overlap again, not an apples to apples comparison, but let's start with this video, which shows almost everything from start to finish over the course of 35 minutes. Explain that and where things go from here.
And I want to walk you through that timeline. And I think there are 3 key moments here when you look through this video that lasted some 35 minutes from the time they arrived. 40 seconds, an officer kept his knee on Frank Tyson's back. And then it took about 5 minutes, 29 seconds between the time he last said, "I cannot breathe," and the first time we actually see officers check his pulse. An additional 3 minutes go by before they start doing CPR. Now, I think what's most disturbing about this video, as you mentioned, they weren't holding him down for several minutes as people pleaded with officers to ask them to get off, but it's the what happened after he was in handcuffs. And you notice that he was very combative, yelling out, "Call the sheriff." And there's actually a woman in that video who says, "No, they're here to help you." So it's clear that he's in some sort of mental crisis or health crisis here. And even when officers get him handcuffed, he doesn't make a peep. To go from being so combative to not saying a word should have been the first indication. You later see the officers making jokes about, at least one of those officers making a joke about always wanting to be in a bar fight. And it wasn't until they looked down and realized something's not right here that they finally call an ambulance. But it still took several minutes, even after that ambulance was called, for them to start administering CPR. Listen to what else they said during that body cam video.
Can you calm down? Yeah, he might be out. Does he have a pulse? I didn't feel one. So can you tell medics to step it up? It was not responsive. And I don't know if I can feel a pulse.
So both of those Canton police officers are now on paid administrative leave as the department investigates. And actually, there's a state department that's actually taking over this investigation. And the mayor says that they plan to be very transparent about what comes out in that investigation. Hallie?
We talked about how Tyson's death is coming nearly at the 4-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. There were so many promises of police reform back then, including, in some instances, the suggestion for reforming tactics that restrict the way that a suspect can breathe. Talk us through that piece of this, Dana.
Yeah, and I think, Hallie, just those haunting words of "I can't breathe." We've heard in several cases where people were killed or where they died after pleading with officers to help them. And this was the same plea that this man made in this video. And I think with a lot of police departments after the murder of George Floyd, there were talks about, you got rid of the carotid chokehold because of what happened to George Floyd. There was talks about not keeping detainees in that prone position with their faces down. A moment you saw this person with his face in the carpet. And so it raises the questions of why was he not flipped over? Why was he not checked on immediately after being put in those handcuffs? And a lot of those questions will hopefully be answered in this investigation.
So again, it's creepy, isn't it? That we now have another case out there where 4 police officers can't restrict one individual, and now that one individual is dead. I have been saying this on this podcast, and I will continue to say it. Law enforcement needs to be reformed because you have 4 law enforcement officers who were trying to arrest him or put him in restraints following an accident. And instead of them, defusing the situation, or at least trying to defuse the situation, say, hey, we would like to talk to you for a few minutes. Were you in the wreck that happened down the road? We just need to get some information. Whatever happened to just defusing this? What happened to de-escalation? That's what I want to know. Because most officers, because again, I don't like law enforcement anyway, but again, your job is to protect and serve. You have been empowered to serve the city and its citizens, and yet you're so quick to go for handcuffs and a gun, but yet speech and de-escalation tactics seem to fly above some of y'all's heads. And again, we saw the knee on the back of the neck. You had him in handcuffs. Why couldn't you roll him over? What was the whole point of not rolling him over to where he's not on his chest, his airway isn't blocked? And on top of that, for cops, how is it that cops don't have EMT training? I mean, most firefighters have EMT training. And yet officers who genuinely arrest people, he goes, well, I'm not sure if he might be out. I can't feel a pulse. And you tell me through all things that you're doing, because you realize, oh, he's not talking anymore. He's not saying anything anymore. And again, it amazes me so that all of that was done. And at the end of the time, when the guy unfortunately passed on, now it's a problem. Because again, police reform should have happened. Should have happened under George Floyd. We did have the George Floyd Police Reform Act. But then America's favorite Uncle Ben, America's favorite Uncle Tom, Tim Scott, killed the bill. Because that was his job on the Republican side, to kill the police reform bill, to kill every bill that the Democrats are trying to push through. The George Floyd Police Reform Act would have been a great step in reforming our law enforcement here in America, and Tim Scott, under orders, decided to kill it, and then try to sit there and say, well, the bill was just too expansive. No, the bill did what it was supposed to do. You just followed your marching orders because you liked the position that you're put in because you kissed enough ass to get there. Shouldn't be surprised by that. But we'll follow that story as it goes along, guys, because as we usually know it, officers get put on administrative leave, and then we see whether or not the DA and the Internal Affairs decide to press charges, which again, we'll see. Because, I thought of George Floyd, we might see a lot more, but every time I see a black man getting detained by police, I wonder if that black man's going to make it home that night, because, again, history has told us different. But moving right along, guys, if you have not seen the Time interview with Donald Trump, I cannot stress this enough about Donald Trump, that this man has the unmitigated gall to say what he said in that Time interview, that if enough people are not paying attention, you should.
Candidate Donald Trump has had a wide berth to talk a lot without saying much. This morning, Time magazine published a new interview with Trump where they asked him serious, probative questions about what a second Trump presidency would actually look like. And it's dark stuff. From a dictatorship only on day one, migrant detention camps, using the Comstock Act to ban abortion, and policing protesters by deploying the National Guard. He told Times reporter that he'd be willing to fire a U.S. attorney who didn't prosecute someone he ordered, noting that it depends on the situation. He explained that obliterating the so-called deep state meant getting rid of bad people that have not done a good job for him. He would absolutely pardon criminals convicted of assaulting the Capitol on January 6th, telling Time that many of those people went in, many of those people were ushered in. You see it on tape. The police are ushering them in. They're walking with the police. When the reporter asked Trump what he thought of Americans who found his language about being a dictator for a day or suspending the Constitution contrary to American democracy, he said, I think a lot of people like it. And much like the last election, when asked if he was worried about violence, Trump acknowledged that it would only happen if he loses, which sounds an awful lot like a threat. Joining me now is Robert Kagan, Washington Post editor-at-large, senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, and author of Rebellion, How Anti-Liberalism is Tearing America Apart Again. which was published today, a timely book. We're going to talk about it shortly, but I want to talk about this Time interview. If I had one criticism of it, Robert, it was the way that they placed Donald Trump's plans, including letting states monitor women's abortions, monitor women's, I guess, menstrual cycles. I don't know how they would do that. And they placed it against, well, here are all the legislative barriers to that, as if there would be legislative barriers, as if there would be some sort of normal functioning democracy with him as president. What did you make of the interview and the revelations therein?
Well, I'm sorry. I have to admit, I haven't read the interview, although I've seen the quotes that came out of it and what you just read. And I think there is a general tendency, unfortunately, in this country to just assume that because our system has been functioning, because the institutions have been operating for many years, that they will save us ultimately. But I think the founders of the Republic could have told us that it isn't the institutions by themselves. The people have to act correctly. The people have to understand what threat exists right now from Donald Trump in terms of becoming a dictator. They spoke of the need for virtue, and by which they meant the people rising up to protect our system against a dictator. I don't mean rising up illegally. I mean rising up electorally, forcing congressmen to do the right thing, et cetera. So I think we can be very passive sometimes and just hope that the institutions will save us. But I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to put up a limited list of the things that Trump has said he would do in 2025. Mass layoffs of civil servants and replacing them with loyalists, terminating the Constitution, politicizing the DOJ to investigate his political adversaries, bomb Mexico, shoot migrants, electrify the wall, no two-state solution in the Middle East, end birthright citizenship, revoke student visas for ceasefire protesters, reinstate and expand the Muslim ban, gut the EPA, exit the Paris Climate Accords, a national ban on trans care for minors, punishing hospitals that provide any transgender care, teaching what he calls patriotic education, terminate the Department of Education. I could go on, allowing states to punish women as they see fit, enforce the Comstock Act to ban abortion nationwide. I mean, everything he has in here, shoot shoplifters, federal takeovers of democratic cities. And people hear that, see that, read that, and say, I want that. What should we make of that?
Well, he was right at the end of, I guess it was, I don't know, it was the end of that interview, but it was the end of your quotations when he was asked, what does he think about, violating the Constitution, et cetera, and calling yourself dictator of a day. And he said, the people like it. And I think that's a very important point that we are not focusing enough on. This isn't just about Donald Trump. He does have a very powerful, very mobilized constituency that is fundamentally seeking to overthrow the fundamental liberal system that the founders created. They oppose it. They oppose it because they think that their view of the nation, they have an ethno-religious definition of the nation. For them, the nation is a white Christian. For some of them, it's a white Protestant nation. This is an old strain in American history, after all. This didn't just pop up. It's just what's happened now is that these people who've always been around, they were part of the John Birch Society, they were part of the McCarthy movement, they were in the South during the slave years, they were in the South during the Jim Crow years. But now, for the first time, certainly in many decades, they've taken control of one of the political parties, and they have a leader who is essentially determined to destroy the system for his own purposes, but what they see is the opportunity to change the system in a way that is more to their liking and therefore not consistent with what the founders intended.
Well, and they've corrupted, this sort of ethos has corrupted the Supreme Court, right? I mean, I detect a desire to institute a kind of religious diktat over the country from people like Samuel Alito. And I've talked about repealing the 20th century as being a core goal of MAGAism. It feels like what offends them is that the 20th century made, and you talk about this in your book, what the Constitution sort of prescribed as a kind of small L liberalism, right? Where there's individual liberty. The 20th century is the great American century because it actually made that more real for women, for workers, for, what used to be child laborers, for people of color, for immigrants, for Black people. And they are offended by it, by the whole 20th century.
That's right. And it's important to separate that from what they talk about. They're upset about wokeness. But, you know, the people were upset about wokeness back in the civil rights era, too. There were many whites who were upset about the civil rights movement, and they regarded it as the wokeness of their time. So it's really true that it is the fundamental elements of our system that they're opposed to, even though they want to say that that's an excess of wokeness. And I just think we need to understand that it isn't just the whims of Donald Trump. And you know, one of the reasons that he's talking the way he talks is that his most reliable group of supporters are what I think you can't have a better word for them than white nationalists. He ran in his first campaign, people don't remember, I think, back in 2011 when he was his first run for the presidency, he ran on a one issue, which was birtherism, which was basically to say that the first Black American president was not really an American. And in so doing, he signaled to those people that he was their representative. And they have basically chosen him as their leader. And they are essential to him because as he goes through these court trials, as he faces the various pressures that he faces in the system, he can't rely on your average, you know, Mitt Romney voting Republican. He has to rely on these hardcore white nationalists, in some cases white Christian nationalists, who are sticking with him no matter what happens in the trials.
And this is the book. We're going to talk more about it on the other side of the break, because I want to get into some of your thesis, which is really about these people saying that they are the.
So let me stop it right there, just because, you know, the fact of what Joy Reid had showed on that entire whiteboard was everything that Trump wants to do within his first term, is within the beginning of his second term. And that's scary. The things that he talked about doing, re-engaging the Muslim ban, shooting shoplifters, enforcing abortion, weaponizing the DOJ, gutting the EPA, terminating the Constitution. You know, when you usually hear someone say something like terminating the Constitution, immediately terrorist comes to mind. And yet, Trump and the many people that voted for him, because again, most of them are, you know, Trump simply loves the poorly educated. And those who are well off and those who have corporations love Trump, because when he was running the show, unfortunately, it was Christmas. And so I point this out because he now again looks to be all but wrapped up with the Republican nomination for president. He's all but wrapped up. The only hope that we have out of this is that out of those 91 convictions, one sticks. And right now, because of his shuffling and jiving, him trying to push back court dates, because he's basically holding the ball, waiting for time to run out. But if there's one thing I truly wish that a lot of these media news sites would do, put up what he said. Keep blasting it, because again, those are his words. Put his words out there and say, this is what I want in my second term as president, and see what happens. Because like I said, I'm not a woman, but if I was a woman and I saw that, I'm gonna be honest with you, forget my French, there's no way in hell I'm voting for Trump. As a person of color, no way in hell I'm voting for Trump. But anybody with a brain cell, nobody should be voting for Trump. But again, this is why we keep saying why voting is important, because for every person that won't vote for Biden, it might as well count as a vote for Trump. Because trust and believe, those backwards, misguided will give Trump their last dollar if it meant the world to them, will be voting in droves. And that's the scary part. The scary part about this is we went from joking how a failed businessman / failed reality star, con man, can become president of the United States again. That right there should be the warning bell as to take this election seriously. But the last story we got, guys, before we get to our feel-good segment, is this I'm going to follow this under no crap Sherlock, because again, because this is being admitted, why is there no prosecution is my question. But you'll see what I mean momentarily.
Republicans tried to dismiss this report as just partisan and also tried to muddy the waters on climate change by talking about everything from the price of energy to wildfires in Asia. Now, Senate Democrats tried to stay focused on how fossil fuel companies' own scientists knew about the threat for more than 6 decades, and then how they worked to hide that knowledge from the American public.
The thing that gets me the most, Mr. Chairman, is just thinking back to the decades in which big oil and gas understood the problem in a way that almost no one else in the country or the world did.
One of Democrats' key witnesses, a researcher from the University of Miami who studies climate disinformation, explained how these oil and gas companies have evolved their strategies over time.
And what investigations like this do is help open that closet door further, exposing yet more skeletons in the closet and bringing up to date our understanding of the fact that these companies' track record of propaganda and delay continue to this day.
The major lobbying group which represents oil and gas companies, the American Petroleum Institute, said in a statement, "At a time of persistent inflation and geopolitical instability, our nation needs more American energy, including more oil and natural gas and less unfounded election year rhetoric," adding that they are investing in low carbon technologies. Now, although today's hearing was largely symbolic, Senator Bernie Sanders did ask questions about how Congress might be able to hold oil and gas companies legally responsible for the impacts of climate change. But of course, that's going to depend upon the outcome of November's election. Reporting in New York.
And unfortunately, he's right. But think about what they just said. Now, much like smokers, much like companies that do cigarettes, that for the longest time denied that cancer, emphysema, other issues were linked to smoking cigarettes. Oh, tobacco didn't cause that. Remember that a long time ago? That was the ads like, oh, it's they don't want you to smoke. They don't want you to enjoy smoking. They don't want this. They don't want that. And then at the end of the day, the Surgeon General's warning was put on the side of cigarette packets. May cause lung cancer, may cause emphysema, may cause breathing issues, not for pregnant women. It is amazing that not one tobacco company faced any type of prosecution because they denied the fact that their product caused harm to humans. Why is that relevant? It's relevant because look at major oil companies. Look at BP. Look at Exxon. Look at my mind went blank for a second. MAPCO. Other areas, other companies out there. But mainly I use Exxon and BP because those are the biggest names that you do here. And of course, there's other ones out there. But the point I'm making is that these oil companies have sat there and pretty much have lied that the effect of fracking, of oil refinement has caused damage to has caused damage and climate change to our environment. They denied it like it was nothing. And now in a hearing, they finally admit that, yes, we've known that the effects of what we're doing have harmed the environment. We've just admitted that we've known. Are you aware that perjury is a crime, sir? At the same time, I agree with the journalists. Will there be any type of prosecution? Nope. And I say this regardless if Biden is president or if somehow, some way, Trump is president. And it hurts my heart to say it. Regardless of whether or not there's a Democrat or Republican in the White House, these oil companies will never see a day in court. You might see a hearing or two, but you'll never see a day in court. And the reason why is because they've well paid Congress. Congress has been well paid by corporations. It's the same reason why, universal health care will never be what it should be as a United payer system because, again, corporations like Cigna, United Health, Aetna, all these other ones have graciously paid these politicians to really look the other way. And that's the problem when it comes to Congress. Congress has a price tag, and these corporations know it and gladly pay it and then write it off on taxes. So, yes, it is symbolic that big oil companies are finally admitting that their effects on climate change was real. But will anything come from it? Highly doubted, as long as money can flow into Congress the same way I can go through Five Guys. Just saying. But we're going to move on to our Feel Good 7, guys. As usually how the Frack We Got Here, we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes make you use your faith in humanity. But hey, it's Wednesday, about to be a pre-Friday, which is Thursday. We want to leave you guys out some good vibrations. And this one by Jalen Hurts, which I love the fact of when I see athletes just doing a good thing, just makes you think that, you know what, we going to be all right.
Of Earth Month, and this morning, the impact that a warming planet is having on schools. And Samara, you have got those details.
Yes, this is an incredible story. As our planet is warming, so are our schools. And as it's getting warmer, here's how one city and a pro football player are taking action. Star quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, Jalen Hurts, making a cool donation, gifting $200,000 in air conditioners to Philadelphia area schools.
I think back to my time as a student, not being able to imagine some of the things that you guys have to go through. I just want to serve you guys. I just want to serve you guys and help in any way I can.
The superintendent of the school district of Philadelphia telling us the donation is set to add 300 air conditioner units to 10 local schools, largely impacting more than 5,000 students.
More than half of our schools lack appropriate air conditioning, such that when the temperature climbs higher than 86 to 90 degrees, we too often have to let our kids go home early. And that really impacts student achievement. It benefits teachers as well, because when teachers have optimal teaching conditions, they're more likely to return as teachers.
The donation would cover rewiring and changing the infrastructure of the buildings. But it's not just Philly. An estimated 41% of schools in the U.S. need HVAC upgrades, which represents 36,000 public schools nationwide without adequate air conditioning. With warming temperatures, the CDC has issued a warning for extreme heat dangers and record-breaking high temperatures. The superintendent says the district has already begun to install the units, and the project will be complete before the start of the next school year.
During the fall semester, when kids come back to school, it's still pretty hot in many of our buildings. In the school district of Philadelphia, we are focused on becoming the fastest improving large urban school district in the country. And in order to do that, our kids have to be in school.
What a great initiative he chose to donate to. And we were just talking about how we've sat in classrooms or we sit in heat and trying to think how difficult that can be.
Yeah.
Think about it in a changing climate. You know, kids, it's not just snow days, but now we're getting heat days. Kids have to miss school because of the heat.
Like really, we have had them out in my community where my kids go to school. When some of the district buildings get too hot, they have to cancel school.
Yep,
It's
exactly. And yeah, I mean, even here, because I was in the South, there were times where it was hot in the school and AC didn't really work with us. But again, shout out to Jalen Rose for actually trying to make a difference, because again, I can go on about the fact that education in this country is woefully underfunded, teachers overworked, and the fact that we divulged 5 times let me leave it alone. Because if education got maybe a third of what the military budget gets, I'm just saying it would solve itself. It would solve itself. But we're going to go and leave it there, guys. Like I said, feel good moment. Not trying to go into it, but thank you guys for watching. Definitely let people know this is live. For liking, for sharing. I certainly appreciate it. Like I said, this cannot be done without you. But I do want to do some shameless plugging. Shout out to my boy Vaughn at BigVZA for check out his pages for beats, things of that nature. Also, definitely, guys, check out BlurStation.com. I cannot stress this place enough. It is the new vehicle, the new media for blurs and people of color, whether it's music, television, movies, special effects, comics, you name it, it is there. And if you do want to join it, guys, please go ahead and select the Join In Now button. Select the Bird's Eye View Offending membership. Again, it is only $10.99 a month. $10.99 a month for viewing Blur Station. And the thing about Blur Station, guys, is after 36 months, you do have the option of owning a piece of Blur Station. And for content creators that want their content to be seen at Blur Station, you do have to join as a member first, and then that'll allow you to be able to reach out to the individuals behind Blur Station, and hopefully you can have your content uploaded there. And again, unlike Tubi, the content that you upload is for yours to keep. The only thing that Blur Station asks is for a cut of distribution. And if you really think about it, that's not really that bad. But again, We keep saying we want our own vehicle, we want our own table, and that table is here, and it's blurredstation.com. So definitely, guys, check that out. As for me, you can definitely find me, Black_Spartan615 on the socials. I usually do reviews on everything that I talk about and things that I see. The link at the bottom of making that a little bit bigger. If you copy and paste that link into your browser, take to my link tree. There's YouTube, Facebook groups for all my podcasts. How the Frack We Got Here, Get Bit Podcast, of course, Off Limits Podcast. Again, like, share, subscribe, turn notifications on, because again, as we try to prevent this weekly, we simply cannot do this without you. Simply put, guys, without you, we can't move forward. And that's the whole point of this show. Just not only the fact of informing you and letting you know about the world around you, but simply put, moving forward. That's how we get things done. And again, I can't stress this enough, guys. We are in a presidential season, which means that, Dorito could still be, Doritos all but wrapped up to be the Republican nominee. Biden's all wrapped up, almost all wrapped up to be the Democratic nominee. I'm not saying don't vote, but I am saying be involved, not just on the federal level, but on the local level as well. Get to know the candidates, what they're about and their values, and see if they match what you are. Plus, if you think you can be great as a politician, there are plenty of sites out there that can help you learn how to run locally in your own home state. And again, make a difference, because that's the thing. We no longer can expect someone else to do it for us. We must be involved in all levels, in all areas. And hopefully this show will empower you to do just that. But as we wrap this up, guys, the last thing I usually say about How the Frack We Got Here, it's all about, simply put, giving you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind. But we do provide a logical, progressive point of view to go along with it. We do a lot better society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to change. We try to change our future, our current, by basically righting our wrongs from the past. Doing the things we should have done, like electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first Black woman to the U.S. Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman as National Cybersecurity Director. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go up at our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians, but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, guys, how the Frack got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Please take care of yourselves and each other. We'll all get through this. Peace.